everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today's video is DJT, Evaluating President Trump's Legacy, subtitle American System Revival. And yes, ostensibly this is President Trump's last day in office, last full day. Technically he's still in office until noon tomorrow. Going to be talking about the theories to the contrary, and just evaluating essentially just like I did with Obama, the Trump presidency. You know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and seeing where it goes forward from here in any case. And, you know, of course, there's 30,000 troops in the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C. They had hundreds of National Guard stationed all around the state capitol buildings, all for naught, right? Nobody showed up except for a couple boogaloo, you know, people in Hawaiian shirts and smoking cigarettes, and basically most of them weren't even pro-Trump. They were just basically, I don't know, some of them were even waving rainbow flags and stuff. I don't even know what's going on anymore. It's obviously, you know, it just was a trap by the feds, you know, for people who are dumb enough to show up. But, you know, it's not to say that, you know, there's no role for gatherings with people who are armed that could have, you know, a political effect. But this, my friend, was not it. This ain't it, Chief. And, you know, there's a lot of people actually within my group who think that, you know, that the trust the plan narrative is going to happen, and that basically today is going to be, there's going to be an emergency system broadcast, and then basically all the military is going to round up all the pedos and the corrupt people in the government. And as much as I'd love for that to happen, again, I distinguish very clearly between hope and expectations, right? But, you know, the guards are in the Capitol buildings, and the insurgents didn't show up. You know, there's a joke that's like, a man walks into a bar with a duck on his head, and the bartender says, "Why do you have a duck on your head?" And the guy says, "Well, it keeps the elephants from attacking." The bartender says, "Well, there's no elephants here." And the guy says, "Well, yeah, see, it's working." Basically, it's, you know, the new variant of that joke is, you know, 30,000 troops roll into the Capitol building, and the informed citizen asks, "Why are there 30,000 troops in the Capitol?" And they say, "Well, it's to keep the insurgents from attacking." And the informed citizen says, "Well, there are no insurgents here." And then they say, the media says, "Well, see, it's working so well." You know, it's just like the flu has been eradicated because people are wearing their masks and social distancing, but COVID is peaking and spiking like never before in the lockdown states because people aren't wearing their masks and social distancing. It's just really staggering, the level of cognitive dissonance in the media narratives. And, you know, the media cracking down, and big tech cracking down, just amplifies the real problem, which is that there is no actual common narrative. There is no public square anymore. That there's just basically these multiple echo chambers, and it exists on both sides. You know, I've listened to a few of the, you know, the shows that are purporting the narrative that today is going to be a military coup in favor of President Trump, and, you know, arresting all the pedos in the government and whatnot. And it's just a lot of narrative. It's a lot of narrative based on, you know, the Q posts and whatnot. And again, we've kind of talked about that, but it reminds me of back before the 2016 election, and I was listening to a bunch of other shows, and I remember, you know, and these were like, you know, alternative media shows, definitely not like mainstream conservative. I forget what the guy's name is, Agnew, not Spiro Agnew, that was Nixon's vice president, but maybe it was related to him, something Agnew. And I remember him saying, like, "Oh, James Comey is a straight shooter. He's a stand-up dude. He's going to indict Hillary Clinton on all these charges, and she's going to be taken down." And now it's just hilarious in retrospect. We know that James Comey is like a deep state swamp creature extraordinaire, and there was never any risk whatsoever of her being indicted, right? Because, again, it's like the left outnumbers the right 18-1 in the DC area, right? The people who occupy these bureaucracies are all fully embedded leftist swamp creatures who only want to see the permanent imperial bureaucracy grow ever larger for their own personal benefit, and also because ideologically they're aligned. They're basically, you know, spiritually corrupted, and they want to see more of that domination, right? They want to see more of that just, again, imperial control. They get off on that basically exercise of power. It's a great cult of power, a satanic, communist cult. And again, communism has very little to do with empowering the working classes. It is very much just about empowering the cabal of people who already control power and giving them all the more, license to exercise that force on other people. And, I still very much am a sort of libertarian and anarchist culturally, but, ironically, I've actually probably abandoned more of my libertarianism within the last several months than ever before. I actually believe that there is an American system that Trump in some ways helped us kind of remember and rekindle. He didn't fully, Trump isn't really very much of a philosopher and an ideologue in any case. He didn't really necessarily do it all in a sense of greater philosophical, coherent worldview, but he did it just because, he's a boomer who still loves America. He knows enough about the economy, but, again, we have to evaluate the good, the bad, and the ugly if we're going to actually learn a lesson that's going to be useful, right? The people who fawn over Trump and say that he can do no wrong and everything in his presidency was absolutely perfect, that doesn't help anything. Just like the people who say Trump is a racist, evil dictator, neo-Hitler, and basically everything he did was just bad no matter what, that doesn't help anything. We have to evaluate things with a sober mindset and actually see what was beneficial, what was useful, and what was just, more baloney in the Washington imperial, idiom, shall we say. And, things like the strikes on Syria, basically all the things that I feel like were bad and not useful and actually ended up costing him a second term ultimately are the things that are in the line of appeasement, right? Of appeasing the imperial bureaucracy, of appeasing the neocons, of trying to appease the left. It didn't really lead anywhere. It's like, yes, he got some more votes from minorities, but it didn't ultimately win anything. And, again, the strikes on Syria, completely, feckless, basically they were designed only for, show, right? Look, we're going to show other countries that we're willing to fire missiles and we're not actually going to hit any targets, right? So he didn't fully commit to the war, which is good, right? It was done to appease the imperial class, and it appeased them for like 24 hours until they realized that he wasn't actually going to commit troops in a greater, wartime effort. And again, thank God he didn't. But still, he committed enough to appease them. Why, right? Because he felt that appeasement would actually achieve something. Putting a bunch of swamp creatures in his cabinet who were betraying him at every turn, right? That was an appeasement to the Washington bureaucracy. What did it achieve? What did putting Bolton in power achieve? They didn't start a war, right? Yes, good. But also it was done to appease and make other countries think that we're going to use the military if need be. Why even posture like that if you're not actually going to follow through? Why not just be honest and basically, actually come forth with what you want to happen, right? This isn't the age where things just, this is the age of, the age of Aquarius, shall we say. This is the digital age when realistically, if Trump were to actually come forward with a strong spine and declare things in line with the American system, which he did to a degree, then he actually could have captured, I think, a fair amount of people who are formerly on the left, formerly liberal, and actually bring people together. The uniting of the country is not going to happen because the media's narrative is going to be just, beaten into people's heads, right? Ultimately, the people with even half of a brain on the Black Lives Matter side, who, basically are against the imperial Washington bureaucracy in their own right, need to align with the rednecks who are against the self-same imperial bureaucracy and just realize that there is an entrenched establishment class and they are the enemy of all the people, period. And no matter what your color, what your stripe, these people don't care about humanity in general or the American people. White, black, red, brown, it doesn't matter. We are all just chattel slaves to them to be extracted from. They are the political class and the establishment. And right now, the pinnacle of their power, of that regime, is pretty much big tech. They are above the government. And the control over information, again, in the 1984 thematics is basically when you can control information, you can control all perception of history, all perception of identity. And once you have that, I mean, political power is an afterthought, right? You can basically guide the ship wherever you want because you're controlling you're controlling the very levers within people's brains, right? And there's very little that can't be done once you have that level of control over people at the linguistic narrative level. And they're basically even up to the point where people just now eschew their entire identity rights. Now there's some report coming out of the 1776 Commission of telling Americans that we need to revitalize ourselves around the principles of the American founding, and I completely agree with that. It's interesting that it came out like a day before Trump's final day in office, but again, a little too late for a lot of things. And of course, we wonder why more couldn't be done back when, the red team had both chambers of the Congress in the beginning of Trump's presidency. But it's because, again, it's the uniparty. Half of them are corrupted. The only thing they could get behind was a tax cut. And honestly, I was in favor of the tax cut for the most part. Also, the Opportunity Zone program came through the tax bill, and I'm very much in favor of the Opportunity Zone program. Brief overview for those who don't understand. For those who basically take money out of the capital markets, and you sell some Apple stock and you have capital gains tax that you're liable to pay. Well, if you reinvest those gains into hard assets in certain underserved parts of the country, then basically you can defer and reduce the capital gains tax liability, defer it for up to 7 years depending on when you invested. And the investment in that Opportunity Zone entity, if you hold for a period of 10 years or more, that investment when you finally sell is exempt from capital gains tax. So it's a very strong incentive to take money out of the overinflated capital markets and stock market and put it into real assets, take it out of Wall Street and put it in Main Street, to put it in simplest terms. And I thought that was a brilliant program. Very simple, very clear, very easy to understand for the majority of people. It never got the attention it deserved from the liberal media because it was something done by Republicans. A black Republican senator who introduced it, and Trump who signed the bill, but probably one of them, if actually embraced, could help a lot of neighborhoods that are predominantly of color, right, more than anything else, right? Money coming in and creating economic opportunities is the best way to raise people up. And this is really what I mean by the American system. And the trade war, I think, and protectionism coming back was also another great thing that Trump did that I didn't really understand at the beginning of his presidency. I was more of an, reduce all barriers to trade, right? But globalism wants that. They want the free trade and globalism. They want all the different, corporate entities around the world to have unfettered access to labor and to materials. But realistically, that's not in alignment with the benefit of the people of this country. The government of this country, ostensibly, what it should do is serve the people of this country, just like in other countries. Their government should serve them. And to the extent that we can use protectionism to nurture and stimulate our own domestic industries for the purpose of resilience, opportunity, economic development, and sovereignty, that's so much more valuable than the nominal economic GDP gain that we would get from having cheaper Chinese, TVs and Walmart clothing and all the rest, right? All this cheap shit that's made in other countries, just imported. It's like, great, we spend less money and Walmart takes over the country. We lose our industry, our real production. And basically, great. I'm glad we all have, 70-inch TVs and we're all impoverished. Whoop-de-doo. It's so much more valuable to maintain our own sovereignty, resilience, and economic productivity. And the government basically can use economic incentives and even the deployment of credit to basically build that infrastructure and to stimulate that. And that is against the conventional libertarian mindset. Again, I've listened to some interesting videos and read some interesting articles over the last couple months, kind of making a very effective point that, the state socialist control model and, Keynesianism and the inflation of credit and central banks on one hand, and the sort of conventional economic right, Friedrich Hayek of Road to Serfdom fame, and reducing all government programs. I think these are two sides of a coin, and they're designed to appear to be opposed, when in reality, both Hayek and Keynes were both British imperialists. They were friends, good friends, and for pretty much their entire lives. And I think if there's real opposing ideologies, you don't necessarily play chess into your elder years with people who you're fundamentally opposed to. And maybe there's a candy-ass notion that, we can all vehemently disagree and still be friends. It's like, no, we have to actually agree on core principles if we're actually going to have a functional civilization, and we're going to be friends on a meaningful level. And I think that ultimately, in a certain sense, they did. They believed in the centralization of power and the domination of this country, the United States of America, by the British Crown in the manner that they used to be directly, and now it is indirectly. And again, the same free trade crowd, the globalists, they are of the same sort, and wants to basically eliminate all barriers to trade so that the existing cartels can dominate freely. And that any threat to that, any protectionism or state-backed, investment in infrastructure and promotion of people and the domestic production is anathema to them. Both on the state-controlled socialist side as well as the conventional free market economic side, because it's, just eliminate all the government and everything will get better. I don't necessarily believe that anymore. I believe that there actually can be a role, and, long ago in this country, there was a role for that domestic stimulation of infrastructure and production. And that the middle class that we used to have, that was much stronger than it is today, was founded on that domestic production, not on trade, not on services, but on production, real raw economic production in connection with the land. And back when we built the railroads, originally the plan was to build, honestly, what China is talking about now, the Belt and Road Initiative, of a universal global highway, right, or a railroad rather, which in the modern era it could also be a highway, but it was basically to go up through Russia via the Bering Strait and go down through Central Asia and into Europe via Turkey, and connect the entire world, both economically as well as culturally and intellectually, to develop a sort of brotherhood of man, to get sentimental. But, ultimately, these things aren't necessarily all candy-ass notions. We can actually bring people together. There can actually be a mutual lifting and stimulation, philosophically, economically, intellectually. But as long as we are, artificially divided and the power is continually centralized in the hand of the usual suspects, then we're not actually going to get anywhere. And so again, I think that Trump did something very special in rekindling the American spirit, of reviving that American story, of basically reminding people that the government exists to serve the people, not to serve nebulous economic concepts or to serve, socialist ideology, right? And, he didn't exactly lead us back to hard money standard, but I think, again, the opportunity zones, the tax cut, there were different programs. Again, I'm not saying that everything Trump did was perfect, and that, I do think that he was probably one of the best presidents in the last 100 years. The bar has been set very low since the execution, the public execution of Kennedy. And even Kennedy wasn't perfect by any means, but as soon as a person really, a person that can actually lead, that is worth so much more than just, raw policy measures. And, so even if Biden, hypothetically, in all a bizarro, opposite world, were to introduce perfect policies, he can't lead. There's no leadership from Biden. There's just hot air. And for people who only care about, hearing hot air float from the words of their fake politicians, I mean, to them that's leadership, I guess. But there actually is such a thing as real leadership. And the media demonized him at every turn. But I thought that Trump was actually a fairly effective leader. Listening to many of his speeches, I thought that he led the country well. And as far as the narrative that he espoused, I thought it was pretty strong. There really just, the follow-through wasn't there. And ultimately, you know, again, even now, like, people are, it's a universal chorus demanding that he pardon Julian Assange and Snowden. And this you know, video is premised on the idea that Trump won't actually pardon Assange. I hope he does. I really hope he does that as a last-minute symbol, a last-minute middle finger to the deep state. I really hope he does. You know, again, even if it's only done for symbolic effect, it would be a very powerful symbol. You know, and Snowden too would be nice, but Assange really, you know, I think that Snowden's having an easier time living in Russia than Assange is living under British control in the prison there. And, you know, even, you know, if we come to the election, right, of all the jawboning about election fraud, which was there, right, this video will probably be banned from YouTube now, but who cares? There, you know, he had the executive order, he had the authority to seize the machines under the premise of foreign influence, which there was from China, but he didn't actually exercise it. He never seized the machines, he never actually performed that audit. Of course, the states needed to do something, but he could have taken the initiative, seized the machines, and performed at least a cursory analysis of the Dominion voting software, you know, with his own team or from federal analysts or whatnot. But it just didn't happen. It was just jawboning, and it was just talking about it. And that talking only goes so far for me. You know, I just, at a certain point, even if you're saying all the right words, if it's just words and you're not actually following through, at a certain point, I got to cut the line and stop, you know, just listening, because to me, action, again, speaks volumes way beyond even the most perfect words. And, you know, we'll see. Again, a lot of people think that there's going to be this big magic last-minute moment tomorrow, and that all the pedos are going to be routed out of the government by the media or by the military. And here's the thing: people need to understand that the military isn't all just heroic patriots, you know, ready to take out evil, right? There's a lot of evil in the military. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Half the people in the high-up military ranks are the ones supporting the military-industrial complex, and they support the foreign wars. First of all, because it's their career path, and, you know, second of all, they actually are part of the cult of power. You know, they actually do enjoy that exercise of dominion, of domination over other countries, and, you know, they don't have respect for human life. I'm not saying all of them do. I'm sure there's a lot of good people in the military, but, you know, again, my uncle is a commander in the Navy, and, you know, he's probably one of the most liberal people I know. There's not a direct correlation between being in the military and being a patriotic American per se. And of course, you know, the liberal military veterans would probably disagree with that statement, say that they're very patriotic, but again, it's the power of narrative over actual reality. And, you know, I guess I'm subject to it as much as anyone, but I do listen to things that disagree with me. I just can route out the bullshit from the other side in a matter of seconds. And, you know, again, I can route out the bullshit and the trust the plan narrative in a large sense too. People need to realize that just blowing smoke up your own ass isn't actually a way to build a better world. That you actually have to challenge your mind. You have to look at things that you disagree with, and you have to understand that the battle is not in just being an echo chamber. The battle is in against the people who disagree with you, and being strong enough to bring that information forward and not just attack people. And, you know, it's hard sometimes to identify who is actually willing to listen versus who is just, you know, spewing right back at you. And, you know, you got to pick your battles, as I've said time and time again. But, you know, I hope that we can learn from the Trump presidency and we can bring forward those aspects of the American system. I think that you know, again, it's not going to happen through Biden, but I think, again, the long battle is where we should be looking, of protectionism and developing our own industry, and, you know, learning how to actually rekindle that American narrative, and, you know, imbue that in our children and the next generation, making sure that they have a strong foundation rather than a weak foundation. Because, I mean, so much of the boomers and their wailing is because of weak emotional foundations from their own parents, you know, who themselves were traumatized by the war machine and the world wars, and it's all this endless chain link of trauma. And at so many points, people do and will and, you know, continue to say, you know, oh, well, it runs in my family and this is just the way it's always been. Well, the buck stops here, and, you know, this is where it runs the fuck out. And basically, I will determine what goes forth into my family bloodline, both physically and emotionally and energetically. And so that's kind of the attitude that we need to have and just build that new world. It's a very, very kind of concerning and scary world that we're moving into, you know, both on the political sphere as well as the real, you know, outlook for the magnetic excursion and the climate of the planet. You know, they think it's just going to keep getting warmer. Meanwhile, there's 10 feet of snow in Japan, right? There's snow all across Spain, like, you know, several feet in some places. There's snow in Saudi Arabia. All of these are 100-year events, 100-year plus events, and nobody will, you know, give it a moment's notice because everything is a distraction, right? So also, you know, one of the challenges is, what are you being distracted from, right? Take your eye away from the jingling keys and look at what's happening in a wider sense. And again, that's the way to keep our heads on straight, to keep building this world, this country, our homes, our communities, and, you know, energetically, spiritually build that strength and that posture that, you know, is needed to progress through all of the craziness that is to come. It is going to get very wild, and having enough guns and food is only a surface level preparation. You need to have peace with your creator. You need to understand that basically things, when they get bad, you need to have that peace within your soul and comfort, you know, with that communion to actually, you know, stand the fight and to not just be, you know, destroyed by the vicissitudes of fate. But, you know, that's my video today. I'm going to be talking more about philosophical things in the next 2 videos. Of course, as always, it touches on political topics, but, you know, we're just going to get back into high philosophy and talk about the world of J.R.R. Tolkien and how that plays into the philosophy and the spirituality that I see coming forward. So anyway, that's my video today. Hope you all have a good one. I'll see you next time. Peace.